Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to another episode of Pioneering Modern. We have a little bit of a special episode for you. You may have noticed on our YouTube that we have a little challenge going on at the moment between me and between Antog. Now, as I mentioned in one of my videos, we have been trying to make Sultai work as a competitive deck, because of course, in from my point of view, mid-range decks, they always lean towards red, because of, well, Seasoned Pyromancer, Ragavan. So we are trying to make Sultai work, me from a mid-range perspective. And how about you, Antog? How are you looking to build your Sultai deck?
Well, I started out with a sort of crashing footfalls theme,
Yeah.
the first one, but I don't think that quite has legs without red.
Mm.
Um, the Teamer Crashing Footfalls deck likes to use cards like Dead Gone and
Yeah.
Fire Ice,
Mm.
and those are great cards to bridge turns 1 and 2 into turn 3 when you're casting your Shardless Agent.
Mm.
But most of the powerful spells that Black brings to the table are those 1 and 2 mana value cards
Yeah.
that you're going to cascade into with your Shardless Agent. So losing red was a big cost I found to the Crashing Footfalls deck. So I decided to try a little different angle and lean more into my combo side instead of trying to do
Mm-hmm.
something a little more mid-range.
Fair enough.
And
Well,
yeah.
so I mean, before we get to the decks, um, why do you think that Sultai has struggled to capture the imagination when it comes to deck building in general? What
Well,
does Jund have, or the Jund colours have, that the Sultai colours didn't? So, for example, even, and this is across the spectrum. You look at control. No one plays Sultai control. People play Bant. People play Jeskai. I've even seen Teamer control. I mean, you look at Teamer Rec. You know that was a deck. But why do you think that Sultai has been kind of neglected?
so the synergies that exist between the enemy colors of green blue and green black are pretty specific and ask for certain styles of gameplay that don't necessarily mesh well together.
Mm.
So the red and green aspects and the green or and the red and black aspects that you get from Jund do work pretty well together. You got your beefy creatures and your solid removal coming together. But with blue, there's not a lot of great removal, and there's
Mm.
not a lot of big creatures. Blue is trying to do more tricky stuff and manipulate the stack to gain its advantage in the game, whereas
Mm.
red can deal with the battlefield a lot more efficiently, and also has the bonus of being able to go upstairs straight to your opponent with some damage if you need to. And I
Yeah.
think that's just kind of why people haven't leaned into the green, blue, black strategies.
Mm. Fair enough.
Black often also tries to go longer in games,
Mm.
and the foothold that a green blue deck wants to grab and leverage for advantage is really early in the game. So
Yeah.
there's just a lot of tension between what green blue and green black are trying to do.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, it. During the process of building my my mid range list, one of the creatures that I it's the only time I've ever wanted this creature to be legal in modern. and that is Uro.
Mm.
Uro would have been absolutely perfect. Now, in no way am I suggesting that it should be unbanned, but in a Sultai strategy, I think Uro would have been the perfect card because it does everything good about green and blue, you know. I mean, I think that's kind of the reason that that card was designed the way it was. Unfortunately, it ended up being too powerful for what it was.
A little too good.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, I'm gonna shout from the treetops again and again and again until somebody hears me. Ban Ephemerate. That card has to go. That is the card that makes elementals too powerful. If you didn't have Ephemerate, that deck would be a bunch of 4 and 5 drops, you know, that are really difficult to cast, and you know the only way of getting your card advantage would be by having Risen Reef on the board. And back in the time of Uro, the reason why it was so powerful, and I played a Bant control list with Uro, and I also played the what's it called, the Eternal Witness time warp loop.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name. Just Eternal Command.
Right, yeah. But basically, I played it because you could ephemerate the Eternal Witness, get back the ephemerate, get back the and get the time warp, and just recycle. And so ephemerate was the card that, in my opinion, it's kept a lot of cards. It's put a lot of cards onto the ban list when, you know, Uro by itself, with no way of flashing, with no way of blinking it, still busted. But I think that the archetypes that sprang out because of Uro, and you know now the elementals, they still revolve around Ephemerate. I think that as the archetypes are at the moment, they wouldn't exist in their current form if it weren't for Ephemerate. But you know,
Seen the 4-color Omnath lists recently, but I thought that I seen them shying kind of away from Ephemerate.
is that so?
Yeah,
I haven't seen one in quite a while.
See a list real quick. I think they are shying away from Ephemerate and actually just playing all good cards instead of cards that let's see, 4 and 5 color on that. Yeah, this one's only running 2 Ephemerate, and
right, but even so, that's 2 more than nil, you know. And
yeah, I think. All right, so I have a slightly different opinion on why the 4-color decks are good, and it's because the mana in the format is too good, and with an 80-card deck,
yeah,
you can play the lands you need.
Yeah.
And the format is situated so that, especially with Wrenn and 6, that the fetch lands are more powerful now than they have been in a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
So, like, Ephemerate isn't really what I fear out of this deck. It's the Wrenn and 6 and the ability to get its mana as it needs it when it needs it. Because, like, this deck is, or at least the deck list I'm looking at right now, is able to run Counterspell in the same deck as a 4-pip spell like Omnath.
Yeah.
Little green pip Endurance and Eternal Witness in the same deck
Yeah.
with yeah, it's just the mana is really good right now. So having 80 cards in your deck allows you to put enough lands in your deck to be able to find what you need when you need it.
Fair enough. And so this does give us a good example of where red and white are so strong colours that Sultai not being able to run them does make them suffer, for it. And as you mentioned, the mana is so strong in modern and it's so powerful that your reasons for not playing 4 colours, they're non-existent. If you can run 4 colours just as easy as you could run 3 colours, then that's why decks like Jund and Abzan barely exists anymore, and Jund runs the Saga. People are leaning towards Jund being a Saga deck. Now, as someone who's played Jund throughout most of their Magic career, if you like, not career, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, and
as someone who's played Jund since they started playing, it's very strange to me to see Urza's Saga being played in Jund. And
we've got some good news for you then, Joe. Riveter's Charm has changed the tide.
Oh, right. Yeah, I love that card so much.
Riveter's Charm gives Jund a reason to stop playing Urza's Saga and get back to its roots.
Yes.
I'm actually looking at a sweet 5-0-1 list right now from Syracuse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I've played with the Riveter's Charm, and it's a brilliant card. It's so flexible. It's 3 mana, draw. Is it 3? Yeah. Exile top 3 cards. So
yeah, and then you can play those cards until the end of the turn. Until the next end step.
Yeah.
So another great reason to play red with your green and black instead of blue. Because the Sultai Charm isn't nearly as powerful as that.
No.
Abzan Charm is pretty darn good too, but still not quite there.
Yeah.
But so Sultai has been a rough color combination to try to get to work for quite some time.
It has.
But I'm kind of optimistic about what we've got here.
Yeah, and I think I am too. I think what's key when it comes to building around this particular color combination is you really have to try to not make your Sultai a Jund deck. And that sounds like a bit silly, especially coming from someone who's plays mid-range. But at least, so I mean, well, before we talk about mine, let's talk about yours. What have you done with your Sultai list?
Okay, yeah. So I got inspired. And instead of the Shardless Agent, as foretold build that I was mentioning earlier, I kind of went in a different direction. If you want to go ahead and bring that up for us, Joe. I chose the artifact synergy to tie the room together. Let's see. We've got the Asmar Anamartica Destina Kuldakar combo.
Hey, you learned how to say it. Fantastic.
Yeah. With Underworld Cookbook to crank out a bunch of food tokens. But to help us get a critical mass of artifacts on the battlefield, we also have Academy Manufactor. So that card, anytime you would make a food, treasure, or clue token, you get to make a copy of all of them instead. So if I were to activate Underworld Cookbook to make a food token, and there's Academy Manufactor on the battlefield,
Hmm.
Instead of just making a food token, I also get a clue token and a treasure token.
Yeah, I've
So,
seen this. I've seen this thing go off, and
oh, it gets pretty nuts.
yeah, I actually played against it in paper, and this guy had like a whole section of his like deck box set aside for clue tokens, treasure tokens, and food tokens,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
it was like a deck of cards. You know, it was like proper chunky, and yeah, and when I played against him, I could see why.
Yeah, so like pushing that angle, I looked for a lot of other create a food token, create a clue token, create a treasure token cards. And also was kind of needing a little mana acceleration, so Gilded Goose slotted right in. Um, Traverse the Ulvenwald is actually kind of the card that ties the room together. With the fetch lands in the deck, with artifacts abound, Delirium isn't very difficult to catch. We have Underworld Cookbook putting cards into our graveyard as well, so if I need to play around getting Traverse active so that I can get my one or two combo pieces, like Emery or Urza, I can push that angle. But with as many tokens as we're making through Academy Manufactor, Cookbook, Tireless Tracker, and Gilded Goose, Urza makes great use of all of those little artifact tokens by creating extra mana. With that mana, I have found that Finale of Devastation is a fun way to use all that mana, while also being a useful card in the early game. For just 2 green mana, I can go get Asmarina Martika, Destina Kuldakar, and put it right on the battlefield. Get the whole engine going that way, or you can go get the Tireless Tracker. Start making more tokens. If I need my combo piece from Academy Manufactor, or if I've somehow met some misfortune and Manufactor is in my graveyard, I can go get that Emery and cast it that way. So another angle that Finale also covers, in addition to Traverse the Ulvenwald. Um, Cranking through our deck with so many artifacts, there's a couple of Planeswalkers that just feel real nice in that sort of environment. And I'm looking at Tezzeret, Agent of Bolas, and Karn the Great Creator. Tezzeret has the ultimate ability that we're kind of using as our main win condition. We're going to have a ton of artifacts on the battlefield, and only needing to +1 Tezzeret to be able to go off with his ultimate is crazy good. And Modern's a format where you're going to be doing some damage to yourself, so we don't even really need a whole lot of artifacts on the battlefield. Just 5 deals till 10 damage because of the double up on him.
Yeah,
So 10 artifacts and they're dead.
yeah,
7 artifacts is probably the sweet spot. 14 kind of feels like the average life total of a 5 to 7 turn game of Magic,
yeah, yeah.
especially if everyone's interacting well.
For sure.
So Tezzeret going off is not unheard of, but Karn kind of gives us what we need when we need it out of the sideboard,
Okay.
giving us alternate win conditions such as Thopter Foundry and Sword of the Meek.
Well, let's take a look, shall we, at the sideboard. So we have 2 Flusterstorm.
Mhm.
Uh,
Flusterstorm is there as our combo answer. Also does a lot of work in the control matchups. So Living End is at least casting 2 spells. So if we cast our Flusterstorm, they have to pay 3, and they generally don't have it. And topping off a counter war with a Flusterstorm feels oh so good.
Then you have Veil of Summer.
Veil of Summer, in addition to protecting us from counter spells, also protects us from cards like Thoughtseize. The nature of combo decks is that Thoughtseize is pretty rough.
Mm.
Any sort of hand disruption is just not great. Also, Archon of Cruelty targets. So we've got that as a little bit of protection.
Oh, interesting.
Indomitable Creativity is fresh on my mind for other reasons that we won't get into in this discussion, but Veil of Summer protecting us from black and blue is wonderful. Lots of hand disruption. Protects our creatures from various fatal pushes and the like.
Yeah. Okay. So how about this
The
one?
Veil of Summer's... Oh, Time Sieve. That one's my favorite. I mentioned earlier that Tezzeret only needs one activation before his ultimate is ready. So, generally, you can get your Time Sieve and buy that extra turn immediately. Tap and sacrifice 5 artifacts. It doesn't say you have to sacrifice Time Sieve as one of those artifacts.
Yeah.
So if somehow you get 2 Academy manufacturers on the battlefield together, one activation of Underworld Cookbook puts 6 tokens onto the battlefield.
Yeah.
You can use 5 of them to take an extra turn, and we are off to the races.
Yeah, this is so. When I played against, I think it was either, I think it was a Grixis variety of this deck, and Time Sieve just wiped me out. It was so good, just it didn't matter what happened because Artifact Hate completely useless against it, you know. So because especially when they've got something like an Emery on the board or something, you know.
Yeah, even if you have to sacrifice it to satisfy the 5 artifacts, you do have Emery available just to recast it the next turn and go again.
So let's talk about Top to Foundry. What's happening here?
All right, so with Thopter Foundry, you get to use it in combination with Sword of the Meek to effectively create infinite Thopter tokens, in addition with Urza. But you got to have that Urza on there as your mana source. Otherwise, you are limited by your mana as to how many Thopters you can create. Typically, the Thopter Foundry... Yeah. The Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek combo, since it gains the life in addition to putting that creature onto the battlefield, in the weaker days of Modern, just that was good enough to put Sword of the Meek, Thopter Foundry combo on the ban list. How Modern has grown since then.
Oh, I know. I mean, even just after Modern Horizons 1 came out, when Urza came out here, you had the Thopter Sword combo decks that were based around this particular combo.
Yep, so that was actually the deck that I immediately picked up right after MH1 was the Thopter Foundry combo deck with Urza, because oh my gosh, it was good.
I really struggled against that deck. At the time I was playing Jund, and it even got to a point where I ended up getting Shatterstorm and putting one in my sideboard because of this. So okay. So
I mean, you got to have an answer somehow, right?
yeah. So
that is certainly one answer.
It is. And so the rest of this is a Karn board, is that right?
Essentially, we've got the greatest hits of a Karnborn in Ensnaring Bridge. We've got a Sundering Titan. We've got a Wormcoil Engine. We've got a Chalice of the Void. We've got a Tormod's Crypt. A couple of things that are generally in Karn boards that I decided against. Trinisphere.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those cards.
I think Trinity is going down in popularity all over. I think, except in Tron.
Yeah,
I think Tron.
yeah,
It feels okay to play it because obviously somehow 1 = 3. You know.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
still waiting
And
for
3
some
= 7.
mathematicians to figure that math out. Yeah.
Yeah. So just.
Yeah, so they often have the mana to cover upgrading the cost of all your spells to 3, but since we're looking to cast things like Mox Amber, Underworld Cookbook, our
Yeah.
mana curve is generally pretty low, so we
Mm.
want to do our best to not hinder that.
Fair enough. So this is an interesting one. I think I made this suggestion, didn't I? So let's look at this one.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Aetherflux Reservoir. This card is awesome. I just can't say enough about it. Whenever you cast any spell, you gain a life for each spell you've cast this turn. So if you've cast 2 spell, you've gained 3 life, and further on up the stack. So this is an alternate win condition, similar in the vein of like Time Sieve or Thopter Foundry. It like dealing 50 damage to a target should be good enough. That should be good enough.
Yeah, sure.
We're not casting a whole lot of spells really quickly since I've kind of abandoned the paradoxical outcome hopes in this deck, but
so actually, we
are
haven't.
still.
That's the first our listeners will have known at all about paradoxical outcome. So tell us what was going on with paradoxical outcome.
So yeah, that was the initial inspiration of this was paradoxical outcome, because we have been calling this challenge the Sultai paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Yet both of us overlooked that card.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, so it hit me one day between today and the challenge initially being laid upon me that we should probably try paradoxical outcome. Unfortunately, though, in Modern, there's just not quite enough eggs to be able to pull it off as well.
I do remember seeing it being played in Standard back in the day.
Yes, yes. It's just that the cards that are used in those type of archetypes to bring back all of the artifacts onto the battlefield so that you can scoop them all up again with paradoxical outcome or sacrifice them to the graveyard, and just aren't quite as mana efficient as in older formats.
Yeah.
I think Open the Vaults is a 6-drop.
Right, fair enough.
So that's a pretty big ask, and when you have that kind of mana available, you're probably already winning and have other awesome things with Urza going on, like Thopter Foundry. So it's just a lot easier and more powerful to do other things right now in the format.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Unfortunately. So I had to abandon the inspiration, but we still have arrived at this, which is, I think, still pretty cool. I've had a couple of games before I switched over to Finale of Devastation. I was running 2 Paradoxical Outcome and just found that I didn't have enough non-token artifacts to be able to really utilize it.
Yeah, so this seems like a pretty interesting deck you have.
Yeah, it's been fun. I haven't got a whole lot of games in with it, but Urza Saga has been really good. Sometimes it's Construct time, and you got to just make your tokens.
Yeah.
Because we only have Underworld Cookbook, Mistress Bauble, and Mox Amber as targets for its searchability. So it's there mainly as your token generator, putting more artifacts onto the battlefield. Getting that Underworld Cookbook to start the manufacturer situation rolling.
Fair enough. One thing that I do like the look of in terms of like a synergy here is the Thopter Foundry and the Finale of Devastation. because
Yeah.
if you can make enough mana, say through like Urza, Finale of Devastation X is 10. You give all of your Thopters, plus 10. It seems quite good. But even if you, just seems like an interesting one. But there we are.
I'm excited about.
Oh, go on.
I'm excited about getting some reps in with Finale of Devastation and finding out exactly how often I manipulate the X for lethal versus finding whatever target I need.
Nice. Well, if you are interested in watching Antog play this deck, be sure to check out the video on our channel. I will put the link below. Please watch it and see what you think. Alright, so should we take a look at my deck? Is it my turn yet?
Absolutely, Joe. Bring it on. What you got for us today, buddy?
I'm quite pleased with mine. And what I will say is I have forgotten to put Beseiju in, which now looking at it seems like an oversight.
Yeah, that card is pretty good in the format right now.
I did forget about it. And so you may have noticed, again, I've done a couple of videos about my deck so far. You may have seen them. If you haven't, please do stop right now, go back and watch them, because this deck has been through a couple of different, shall we say, drafts, and each time has been a fairly significant change. But let's take a look at where we are now, and I've gotten it to the point where I'm really quite happy with it. Here we go. So as I mentioned, I forgot to put in the Beseiju into my deck, but we have 22 lands. We have 4 ignoble hierarchs. So overall, this is 26 mana sources. Now we have 3 blooming marsh. We have a breeding pool, a creeping tar pit. So creeping tar pit is the man land from Black and Blue. It's most often seen in Grixis Control when you see it, and it's fantastic. I love this. It can't be blocked. It's a nice card to have when you're out of cards, you don't have any cards in hand, and you need a mana sink. It's very nice for that. So
I think it's like the 3rd best creature land or something like that. After Colonnade and Hall of the Storm Giants. So
fair enough.
Group with rarefied the air. Creature lands. There's a pretty high standard for those. So.
See, as a Jund player, I would like to dispute that 3rd place spot going to rocks, or what I call rocks, but everyone else calls Raging Ravine. I think that is 3rd place or 2nd place.
Your boomer is showing.
Yeah, just a little bit, but yeah, good old rocks. It never let me down.
Well, now you get to feel the joy of Creeping Tar Pit instead. So let's get some data and then come back to me whenever you've felt the joy of Creeping Tar Pit getting dubs.
I've come up against Creeping Tar Pit before, and it is one of the most frustrating creatures to play against when you're when you've got a load of creatures on the board, because it can't be blocked. So then, anyway, let's move on. So we have a forest, we have Nurturing Peatland, just the one. I tried 2, but I kept drawing it and losing life, and I wanted to fit in an extra. I wanted to fit in a filter land, a Sunken Ruins. So 1 Overgrown Tomb, a playset of Polluted Delta. The Sunken Ruins, as I mentioned, a couple of swamps, 4 Verdant Catacombs, 2 Watery Graves, and the Zagoth Triumph. I would like to point out here, going back to what we were saying about the mana, like the mana in Modern at the moment, I do kind of think that the Triomes were a secret mistake in Modern. I don't think they should exist. The Triome
really good.
The Triome is just by far the best turn 1 land to go and fetch if you don't have anything to do. It just, you no longer have to worry about playing, your mana when you've got a Triome on the board. Now, so as I mentioned, the playset of Ignoble Hierarch. So this is pretty simple, really. Exalted, and it can tap for Jund colours. I do wish that they would bring one out for each shard, should we say. They've got one for Bant, and they've got one for Jund. What about the other colours? We'd like to see one, please. Thank you very much. Watsy.
I think it might be a little dangerous to give any of the other colors a super efficient mandatory claim back.
So
I'm just saying, like, Teamer doesn't need any help like that.
Yeah, fair enough, I guess so. But so far, as we can see, it's looking pretty jundy, isn't it? Apart from the Ignoble Hierarch, we have 3 Thoughtseize, 3 Inquisition, 3 Push. So far, very jund. Wouldn't you say?
I think Ignoble Hierarch's doing its best Deathrite Shaman impersonation here. So.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So then
definitely feels jund.
Yes, yeah. So then we have Assassin's Trophy, 2 of. So Assassin's Trophy is just that catch-all removal, and 4 Tarmogoyfs. Again, we're still pretty much a Jund deck. Now, this is where. So from now on, this is where, when I was talking about trying to lean into the Sultai colours' strengths are, and because or rather than Sultai, let's say blue. Blue, it's a completely different colour from red in terms of what it can offer. Red, it's a very, should we say, very aggressive colour. Dealing damage to face, dealing haste damage. Blue is very different. Blue is more of a tempo colour. It outvalues your opponent, or it puts your opponent on the back foot whilst you go on the front foot. And it's kind of like Delver. You look at Delver in Legacy, that is the perfect example of a tempo deck. The idea of a tempo deck being that you control your opponent on their turn and put yourself ahead on board on your turn. So now here we have 4 copies of Dorothy Voidwalker. Now this one, I like this one very much because it's got Shadow. So it's basically unblockable. There are no other cards in Modern at the moment that have Shadow. So basically this might as well just say unblockable.
I would hate to see the day that this card sees enough play that we play other Shadow cards.
Right, exactly. Because, there aren't really any other Shadow cards that are any good.
Yeah, they're not playable at all. This is definitely the most playable Shadow card in Modern because it's doing its best impression of a Tempest card. So
exactly. Now, so what's important about this one is that you can sacrifice it. It's unblockable, but it can be. It's also a graveyard hate spell, so it turns off Murktide. it turns off any graveyard deck, but also you can sacrifice it and choose an exiled card an opponent control or owns with a void counter on it, aka a card that has been exiled because of Dorothy Voidwalker, and play it without paying its mana cost. Now, when I first started testing this card, I accidentally forgot about this this sack ability, and in the end it wasn't that big of a deal. I won the game anyway, but I had the opportunity, and I'm totally gutted that I didn't, because I also had a Tarmogoyf on the board. I had the opportunity to sacrifice it to get a Scion of Draco, a 12 mana spell, and that would have been absolutely wonderful. But
nice
it
little
wasn't
4/4 flyer.
Yeah, but more importantly, it would have given my Tarmogoyf trample.
Yeah, God, Scion of Draco is so good.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
Had a lot of fun with it. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it in a tribal zoo.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, next, so this is where we're really leaning into the blue. In my opinion, Flash is one of the most underused, underrated mechanics in Modern. So what this deck now wants to do is to try and lean into, it wants to tap into that ability to flash creatures in. So we have 4 copies here of Brazen Borrower. Now, this one sees a lot of play in Not Living End in Rhinos, because it has an interactive spell as an adventure, attached to it. Now, we are just trying to tempo our opponents out here a little bit, but essentially we're flashing this in on their end step, and we are going to town as fast as we can. So this is just a fantastic card, because you can return an annoying permanent and then flash it in, and it's really good. So we then have Liliana of the Veil. This kind of is just a catch-all. It sits in the deck nicely. It does mid-rangey things, so it's really nice to have. And then we also have a one of Kaito Shizuki. Now, this one I'm testing. I think it's really nice because it's in this deck. It's almost a guaranteed draw 2 cards for 3 mana. Because so the +1 is draw a card, then discard it unless you attack this turn. So generally speaking, I'm not going to not attack. So this is generally draw 2. The reason being is that the text at the top, the static ability, it says at the beginning of your end step, if Kaito entered the battlefield, he phases out. So that means that you draw one card this turn. It can't be attacked or killed, by attacks on your opponent's turn, and then it will come back on your turn again. So drawing a card for a second time is very nice. I'm still on the fence about it. I am considering another card to put in here, but I will talk about that later. The next one, so Shardless Agent. You had some trouble with this one, didn't you, in the end, with your Footfalls version? Well,
yeah, since I wasn't trying to step on your toes with the mid-range action, I wasn't able to. Yeah.
Well, so this card plays the same role that Bloodbraid Elf played in the Boomer Jund lists, except of course it can come down on turn 2 for us because we have Ignoble Hierarch. So, and there are very few cards here that are a miss. You know, like I would be on turn 2, I would be perfectly happy to cascade into most of these, because even even if I cascade into another Ignoble Hierarch, and this has happened quite a few times when I've played it, turn 1 played an Ignoble Hierarch, turn 2 played Shardless Agent and cascaded into another Ignoble Hierarch. But what that means is that the turn that it attacks, it becomes a 4/4, when it attacks because of the Exalted triggers. So, a 4/4, it's not bad. I really do not mind this card at all. It's a good card to have in the deck.
And that's not even mentioning that you have 5 mana once you play your land on the next turn.
Exactly.
At turn 3.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's it can be quite powerful. And then we have Subtlety. Now this is another criminally underplayed card, but it's because everybody loves Solitude and Fury. Now I can get behind Fury, I really can, but this one is just so powerful. I've played against it. I play a lot of Ponza, and I've played against this, and this is the most irritating card. Being able to get them to put a creature spell on top or the bottom, or even a planeswalker spell, as well, on top or bottom of their library. It's such a nice thing to have. So this is the top end at the moment. So what you'll notice is there's a lot of evasion going on here. We have Brazen Borrower, which is flying. We have Dorothy Voidwalker, which has Shadow, and we have Subtlety here, which has flying. But most importantly, these two are cast on your opponent's turn, hopefully, generally speaking. And I think that's where this deck's power lies. So I have been considering adding in a card called Springleaf Avenger to this deck as a top end. Perhaps cutting the Kaito Shizuki and possibly, I don't know what yet. I think that card, so what it does is you can ninjutsu it in for 4, and it has an Eternal Witness effect. So you are putting, say, the Brazen Borrower back into your hand, so you can recycle it with, you can use the Petty Theft effect again. Or you are putting a Dorothy Voidwalker back into your hand, and you are able to go and get a card from your graveyard and put it into your hand. That could be a Shardless Agent, for example. So you're able to, and on top of that, so it costs 4 mana to ninjutsu in, especially if you do it on the Dorothy Voidwalker, it can't be blocked. So, and it's a 4 mana 6/5. So it's a chonky boy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so it's only ever going to be like a 1 of, maybe, or a maximum 2 of. But yeah, like that is something that I'm looking at, maybe changing about this deck. But other than that, I think this deck is wonderful. I really like this deck. So let's take a look at the sideboard. So we have, there we are. We have Spreading Seas. So this sideboard has just come from experience whilst testing the deck. I came up against Tron, which of course if you've watched the video previous to this one, you would have watched, and you will have seen that I lost. I didn't have Spreading Seas in my sideboard, but I wish I did. And I've noticed as well, or at least I've been told, that there's a lot more Tron recently out there because it's very good against the 4-color decks. So
yeah, I actually have seen a lot more Tron in the wild.
So I think the Spreading Seas here is a nice card to have. Mystical Dispute. This one is, the only counterspell that will fit in the deck probably. I tried Drown in the Loch, and I wasn't a fan, and the reason being is because of Shardless Agent. So obviously Shardless, the Cascade ability, you cascade when you cast a spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less, so less than 3. So basically with Drown in the Loch, just twice I cast Shardless onto a turn 2 board, and they didn't have a turn 1 creature for me to hit with the Drown in the Loch. So I ended up cutting it from this list. Other than that, as I said in the first video, I think it's the best counterspell in Modern. I don't think there's a better one. So Mystical Dispute, it can cost 1 mana, but it doesn't get hit by Shardless, which is quite useful to have. Then we have Weather the Storm for burn matchups and prowess matchups. This has been particularly good against those decks and has made them concede quite quickly. Then we have 2 copies of Endurance. I actually used to play this in the main deck, but I wanted to open up a few extra spells that are blue in colour for Subtlety to pitch to. Whilst Endurance is great, and I think it fit in the deck really perfectly, I was just concerned that having double black, double blue and double green was a little bit of a stretch, so they've been relegated to the sideboard for now. 2 Force of Vigor, 2 Engineered Explosives, so there's Force of Vigor and there's Engineered Explosives, and then 3 copies of Chalice of the Void. So generally speaking, I'm really happy with this deck. Obviously it's quite different from the deck that you would have seen in the second video. In the second video I was running the Ledger Shredder and the Mishra's Bauble sort of pair, because I thought that it would work well, but it ended up not working as well as I wanted, because Ledger Shredder, when you've got no cards in your hand, Ledger Shredder becomes a little bit of a liability, because this isn't really a graveyard deck, and you don't have any choice if the trigger goes off or not. The trigger isn't a made trigger. So with the Ledger Shredder, if you've got no cards in hand, you have to draw and you have to discard. And I found myself drawing cards that I really wanted and having to discard them, because this is a mid-range strategy, and the plan is with Liliana, for example, to both get you top decking, and generally speaking you're going to have the more powerful top decks. So it didn't really fit, but Shredder works better with cards that are less powerful. So cards that when you have lots of cantrips, you're able to keep your hand full. So Ledger Shredder is better for that kind of deck, I realised.
Yeah. You also hit on how you're not really manipulating your graveyard a whole lot, and everywhere I've seen Ledger Shredder
Yeah,
is also doing something. Maybe not their entire deck is surrounded by their graveyard, but they are doing quite a bit with their graveyard, i.e. Delirium or building a big Murktide region.
yeah, yeah. Now I did actually begin this deck's journey began with having Murktide in it, but very slowly my deck lost its number of instants and sorceries, and I would only ever really bring in, or I would only ever really play Murktide as like a 4/4 or a 5/5, which for 2 mana isn't terrible, but I just felt like it wasn't worth it. It just didn't seem worth doing.
A little underwhelming considering the
Yeah,
other options.
yeah, and also I found that if you've got a couple of ignobles on the board, and you've got a subtlety on the board, or a brazen borrower on the board, or a Dorothy Voidwalker on the board, all these evasive threats, if you've got one or two of these on the board, your subtlety will grow and it will become a 4/4, or become a 5/5. Yeah, like the ignobles provide that little bit of extra power, that little bit of speed that maybe when you look at this deck, you've got 3/3, 3/1, 2/2, 3/2. There doesn't appear to be a lot of power in this deck, compared to say, Murktide region, But when you see it in action, when you see the ignobles providing you with that extra, power, it actually becomes worth it.
Yeah.
Again, I would be happy to test the Springleaf Avenger, but yeah, like so. This is my mid-range deck that I'm actually quite pleased with.
I'm trying to think of any cards that I would consider in this deck. Something like Growth Spiral comes to mind.
Growth Spiral. Okay.
Just as a thought.
So Growth Spiral, I think you'd need to run at least 24 lands.
Okay, I can get behind that just to make sure that you have the extra land drop.
Yeah.
To fully take advantage of it.
Yeah, like if I was to play the Growth Spiral, I would say cut the ignobles and say the Kaito and maybe the third subtlety and play the play set.
It's kind of taking the deck in a completely different direction almost. Yeah, you're not trying to 100% flash your opponent. You're just using it as your top end.
Yeah. So what I will say is what is nice about having subtlety is that it is also, if you don't need subtlety to win the game. So generally speaking, like there's 2 ways to win this, and that is Shardless Agent provides you with your early threats like Dorothy Voidwalker, like Tarmogoyf. But then if you get to the mid to late game, subtlety then becomes like a more important threat. And so with subtlety being able to be an evoked threat, for free, if I'm able to pitch a Brazen Borrower to subtlety, it's just an extra way of, interacting with your opponent. Like if you look at a Jund deck, normally there's somewhere between 16 and 19 instants and sorceries that are all ways of interacting with your opponent. This doesn't have that. This only has 11 instants and sorceries, but it has 4 copies of Brazen Borrower, and 3 copies of subtlety. So so 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and there we have it. So we
making
have
up that difference there.
And so this deck it works because we are taking advantage of what blue can do that red can't.
Another card that comes to mind that you should probably mention is Snapcaster Mage. I can see people asking about that. I know why you're not running it, but maybe mention that.
If you are thinking about Snapcaster Mage, I would say turn 2 Shardless into Snapcaster Mage doesn't sound too fantastic. I would also say turn 4 Shardless into Snapcaster Mage is only any good if you have a Fatal Push, an Inquisition, or a Thoughtseize in the graveyard. And so that's the reason why there's no Snapcaster. If I wasn't playing Shardless, if I wanted to, I could cut Shardless and play 4 copies of Fatal Push and switch out the ignobles for more interaction. That is an option, but I like Shardless, and so I'm playing it with Shardless. But so if you wanted to, you could cut the Shardless, cut the ignoble hierarchs, because you don't need that turn 2. You don't need that turn 1 kind of ramp if you're running Snapcaster Mage. But if you wanted to, you could play the extra extra removal spells. Like if I weren't playing Shardless, I'd go up to 4 push. I'd go up to I'd get Drown in the Lock in there, easy. In fact, I'd probably just go, I'd take out Shardless, take out Ignoble, put in 2 Snapcasters and put in 4 Snapcasters, put in 4 Drown in the Locks, because Drown in the Lock is just bonkers. It's just really good. But so
the last card that comes to mind that I wanted to ask about is Night Pack Ambusher, I think is the name. It's either Night Pack or Howl Pack.
Night Pack Ambusher. So I did consider it. And it is a nice card. But at the end of the day, it is always going to be 4 mana. So in fact, I do actually have a copy. I bought a copy or 2 to test. Let me just grab them for you.
That's just the only other card that I think that is close to being a considerable card for this deck. It might also be pushing the flash aspect a little too far as well, pushing the mana curve of your deck too high.
Well, so the thing about this is I really want this to work, and it makes sense as well to play it in this deck. Because Brazen Borrower I can play on my opponent's turn, Subtlety I can play on my opponent's turn, so I can go I can go Shardless into Night Pack and hold up my Brazen Borrowers and Subtleties until I've untapped after playing Night Pack. But and what it means is that every turn I get a 3/3 at my end step. So it's definitely not terrible, but I think with again it's double green.
I was about to say it's very similar to the endurance problem you were facing earlier. Even though it is at 4 instead of 3, it's still double green, double black, double blue. And,
So I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not a terrible problem to have when you're playing a Triome. Like when you're playing a Triome, it's actually not that bad to have double. But even so, it's a 4 mana card, 4 mana 4/4. There's a reason why it's not played in Modern already. There's a reason why should we say, like, what's another deck that plays a lot of like the elementals, the flash ones? There is the possibility of trying a deck to play this, but no one has tried it yet. And
this deck isn't quite that deck, so
no. I think it's nice. And in a casual F&M, I'd give it a go. But I do think, I definitely do think that the Springleaf Avenger is worth a look, because I don't own one, unfortunately. But I think the Springleaf Avenger is worth a look, just because there are so many, evasive threat. But there we have it.
Exactly. Indeed.
So, do you feel like you're comfortable taking your deck through a league?
Maybe with a couple more games under me with the old Finale Devastation. I want to give that a good due diligence before I decide I want to hop into a league.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I'm close. I'm close.
Fair
Definitely
enough.
not with the As Foretold build that I had before, though.
But no, that's fair enough. Well, I've played this deck now enough where I think it's as good as it's going to get as it is right now. I might switch out the Kaito and put in the Springleaf Avenger, but other than that, I think after I've done that, I will put this through a league, which I will put in another video, so please stay tuned. We'd love for you to watch it.
Absolutely. I'm trying to put out as much content as possible, so keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, so thank you very much. This has been Pioneering Modern. Of course, we haven't even mentioned that Scratch isn't here. We just pretended he didn't exist. I do apologise, Scratch, if you're watching this. But our dear Scratch is on holiday at the moment. So
they're having a little more fun than we are right now. So they get to.
Yeah. So whilst they're away having some fun, I think they're camping actually.
I think that's what they said. Yeah, camping.
Yeah. So hello, Scratch. Wherever you are, we miss you, of course. But
indeed.
So
enjoy.
Here we have it. Now, so we would like you to get in touch with us. If you know of some way that we can change our decks, or if there's any glaring holes or anything that we've missed, please do let us know. At SnakeEyesMTG. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. Please let us know. Thank you very much. Take care, Anthony.
Take it easy, Joe.
Bye-bye.